My name is Emily Carter, and 3 weeks ago my life changed in a single violent moment. I was driving home after a long shift at the hospital, tired but satisfied with the patients I had helped that night. The streets were nearly empty, and the traffic lights shifted quietly above the intersection ahead. A delivery truck sped through a red light without slowing down, and the impact crushed the front of my car before I could react. Metal twisted against metal, glass shattered around me, and the world disappeared into darkness. When awareness slowly returned, everything felt distant and muffled, as if I were trapped beneath deep water. I could hear machines beeping in steady rhythm beside me, yet my body would not answer when I tried to move. Later, I learned that I had been in a coma for several days, suspended between life and something far more uncertain. The doctors believed I still had a real chance to recover, and they were prepared to continue intensive treatment. What I did not know was that my father, Richard Carter, had already spoken for me. While I lay unconscious in that hospital bed, he signed documents approving a Do Not Resuscitate order, insisting that he was protecting me from prolonged suffering. That was not true. I had never told anyone I would choose to stop fighting for my own life. I was 32 years old, with plans, responsibilities, and a future I had built with determination. Nurse Patricia Morgan remembered my clear instructions about emergency care, and she felt uneasy about the sudden paperwork. My closest friend, Rachel Bennett, was legally named as my healthcare proxy, yet no one had contacted her before the order was signed. As the machines kept my heart beating, decisions were unfolding around me, and those choices would soon reveal a truth I never expected to face. Nurse Patricia Morgan had worked in critical care for more than 20 years, and she trusted her instincts when something felt wrong. She reviewed my medical chart carefully, noticing the timing of the newly signed Do Not Resuscitate order. According to the record, my father, Richard Carter, had authorized the document within hours of my arrival. The doctors had not yet completed all neurological assessments, and my vital signs were beginning to stabilize. That detail alone raised concern in her mind. She remembered a staff training session months earlier, where I had spoken openly about emergency treatment and my desire for full intervention if needed. I had been clear and unwavering, and several colleagues remembered that conversation as well. Patricia could not reconcile those words with the sudden decision my father claimed to honor. She asked the attending physician whether my designated healthcare proxy had been notified. The answer unsettled her further. Rachel Bennett, the person legally authorized to speak for me, had not been contacted before the order was approved. Hospital policy required communication with the listed proxy, unless extraordinary circumstances prevented it. There were no such circumstances in my case. Patricia felt a responsibility that extended beyond routine paperwork, and she quietly reached out to Rachel that same afternoon. When Rachel received the call, she was stunned and immediately drove to the hospital. She carried a copy of the legal documentation I had filed, confirming her authority to make medical decisions if I could not. As she entered the intensive care unit, she saw the machines surrounding my bed and felt a surge of disbelief. Someone had acted without her knowledge, and the implications were far more serious than anyone had admitted. Rachel Bennett stood beside my hospital bed, trying to steady her breathing as she absorbed what Nurse Patricia Morgan had explained. The machines continued their steady rhythm, and the sound felt both reassuring and fragile at the same time. Rachel asked to review every document that had been signed since my admission, determined to understand how a Do Not Resuscitate order had been approved without her consent. Hospital administration confirmed that my father, Richard Carter, had presented himself as my closest living relative and insisted that immediate action was necessary. He claimed that I had privately expressed a desire not to remain on life support if my condition became severe. Rachel knew that statement was false. We had spoken in depth about medical choices many times, especially because we both worked in healthcare and understood the risks. I had always said that I would fight for recovery as long as there was a reasonable chance. Patricia supported Rachel's concern and quietly pointed out the timeline in my chart. The order had been signed before several diagnostic results were finalized and before specialists completed a full neurological evaluation. That detail suggested urgency where patience was required. Rachel requested an immediate review of my status and formally presented her legal documentation as my healthcare proxy. The attending physician agreed to suspend the order, pending further evaluation. Meanwhile, Richard waited in the family consultation room, projecting calm confidence to anyone who asked questions. He spoke about dignity and mercy, yet avoided direct conversation with Rachel. The atmosphere inside the hospital shifted subtly that day. What had seemed like routine paperwork now carried the weight of possible manipulation, and Rachel sensed that this decision was only the beginning of something far more troubling. Rachel Bennett met with the attending physician, and she presented the proxy documents without hesitation. The hospital legal office reviewed the paperwork, and they confirmed it was valid and current. With that confirmation, the staff could no longer accept Richard Carter as the final voice. Nurse Patricia Morgan stayed close, watching every step with quiet focus. Rachel asked for a new assessment, and the medical team agreed to repeat key evaluations. They reviewed my neurological signs, and they compared results from the last several days. The findings were still serious, yet they did not support giving up. There were signs of improvement, and the doctors believed my body was responding. Rachel requested that the Do Not Resuscitate order be placed on hold, pending a formal ethics review. The physician agreed, and the order was suspended immediately. Patricia felt a rush of relief, and she also felt anger rising underneath it. A single signature had nearly closed the door on my recovery. Rachel then asked to speak with Richard, and she found him waiting in the family room. He looked composed, and he spoke as if he expected gratitude. He repeated the same story about compassion and dignity, and he acted as if questions were disrespectful. Rachel did not argue about emotions. She focused on facts and authority. She told him that she was my healthcare proxy, and she had taken control of medical decisions. Richard's expression tightened for a moment, and then he forced a thin smile. He said he only wanted what was best, yet his eyes avoided hers. Patricia noticed that he asked about paperwork, not about my condition. He asked about signatures, timelines, and who had access to records. The questions felt transactional, and they did not sound like concern. That evening, Rachel stayed beside my bed, listening to the machines and watching my breathing. Patricia adjusted my medication schedule, and she checked my vital signs with extra care. They both understood one thing clearly. Someone had tried to make a final decision too quickly, and they could not allow that to happen again. The next morning, Nurse Patricia Morgan noticed small changes that others might miss, and she documented them with careful precision. My breathing was steadier. My reflexes responded more consistently, and my vital signs held strong through the night. Rachel Bennett stayed close, sleeping in short stretches in the visitor chair, and waking at every change in the machine sounds. The doctors explained that recovery from a coma could be uneven, and that progress often came in quiet steps. Rachel listened, and she asked direct questions about treatment plans and about the risks of sudden setbacks. Patricia continued to monitor me closely, and she adjusted my care with steady hands. By midday, my eyelids fluttered for the first time in days, and a faint movement touched my fingers. Rachel leaned forward, speaking my name slowly, and asking me to squeeze her hand if I could hear her. At first there was nothing, only the rhythmic beeping beside my bed. Then my fingers tightened around hers, weak but unmistakable, and Rachel's face filled with shock and relief. Patricia called for the physician immediately, and the staff gathered with renewed focus. The doctor examined my responses and confirmed that I was showing meaningful signs of awareness. Rachel held my hand and she kept her voice calm and steady, even as her eyes filled with tears. In the hallway, Richard Carter asked what was happening, and he tried to enter with a confident stride. Patricia stopped him at the door, and she told him the medical team needed space. Richard frowned, and his composure slipped for a brief moment. He did not ask how I felt. He asked whether the hold on the order was still active. Rachel heard that question later, and it chilled her. In that moment, she understood that the danger had not passed. My life was still being treated like paperwork, and someone was still trying to control the outcome. In the days that followed, my recovery continued in small, measured steps, and the staff treated each sign as a fragile victory. Nurse Patricia Morgan spoke to me often, keeping her voice calm and steady. Rachel Bennett stayed beside me whenever visiting hours allowed, and she repeated familiar details to help anchor my mind. I could not speak clearly yet, but I understood far more than anyone realized. I heard conversations in the hallway, and I sensed tension when Richard Carter appeared. He arrived with a practiced expression of concern, yet his questions kept circling the same subjects. He asked who could authorize decisions now, and how quickly records could be released. He asked whether an ethics review created delays, and whether the hospital might face liability. Patricia noticed that he rarely asked about my pain, or my awareness, or my chances. Rachel noticed it too, and she began taking notes after every interaction. One afternoon, Richard tried to meet with hospital administration again, insisting he should be restored as the primary decision-maker. Rachel presented the proxy documents once more, and the legal office confirmed her authority without hesitation. Richard's face tightened, and he forced a polite tone, but impatience leaked through his words. He claimed he was acting out of love, and he insisted he only wanted peace for me. Rachel responded with facts, and she reminded him that I had made my wishes clear long ago. Patricia quietly informed the attending physician about Richard's repeated inquiries and about the suspicious timing of the original order. The physician agreed that the situation warranted caution, and an ethics review was scheduled. That evening, Rachel leaned close to my bed, and she told me she would protect my interests. I wanted to answer, and my fingers moved weakly against her hand. In that moment, Rachel understood that my story was not ending in that room. It was only beginning, and the truth behind Richard's urgency was waiting outside the hospital walls. Once I became more alert, Rachel Bennett began asking careful questions, and she did it with quiet persistence. She spoke with Nurse Patricia Morgan, and they compared every detail they had witnessed. The timing of the Do Not Resuscitate order still felt unnatural, and Richard Carter's behavior kept raising new doubts. Rachel decided to look beyond the hospital, and she contacted a clerk at the county records office. She asked a simple question, and she listened closely to the answer. Had any recent documents been filed under my name, or connected to my home address? The clerk found something that made Rachel go still. A property-related filing had been recorded during the week. I was unconscious, and it involved authorization that should have required my direct consent. Rachel requested copies, and she drove to pick them up in person. When she read the pages, her hands began to shake. The signature line showed my name, yet the handwriting did not match, and the dates aligned with my coma. Rachel brought the documents back to the hospital, and she showed them to Patricia in a private moment. Patricia studied the papers, then looked at Rachel with growing alarm. This was no longer only a medical concern. It suggested fraud, and it suggested motive. Rachel asked the hospital legal office whether Richard had requested any additional forms, and the staff confirmed he had asked about access to financial information. He had also asked about how quickly identity documents could be verified. Rachel felt a cold certainty forming in her chest. Richard had not been trying to protect me from suffering. He had been trying to control what happened next. That evening, Rachel sat beside my bed, and she spoke slowly so I could follow. She explained the property filing, and she told me she suspected someone had forged my consent. I could not speak yet, but I squeezed her hand with the strength I had. Rachel nodded and promised she would take the papers to an attorney. Patricia promised something too. She would document every interaction with Richard, and she would protect my chart from quiet manipulation. Rachel Bennett did not waste time, and the next morning she met with an attorney named Matthew Reynolds. She chose him because he had experience with elder fraud, estate disputes, and forged authorization documents. Rachel brought the county records copies, and she explained my condition, my coma timeline, and the hospital conflict involving Richard Carter. Matthew read the paperwork slowly, and his expression hardened as he compared the dates and signatures. He pointed out that the filing relied on authority that Richard should not have possessed, especially while a valid healthcare proxy existed. He also explained that if Richard had used a false power of attorney or forged my consent, it could involve criminal charges and civil penalties. Rachel asked what to do first, and Matthew gave clear instructions. He told her to preserve every document, keep a written log of conversations, and request a formal records audit from the hospital. He also advised her to place a temporary alert on any property transactions tied to my name. Rachel returned to the hospital with renewed focus, and she asked nurse Patricia Morgan to help gather evidence. Patricia provided copies of the chart timeline showing when the Do Not Resuscitate order had been presented and when it had been suspended. She included notes about Richard's repeated questions and about his unusual interest in paperwork rather than my well-being. Matthew reviewed those details and confirmed they supported a pattern. Meanwhile, he prepared letters to the county office and to Harbor National Bank, requesting that they flag any recent loans or lines connected to my property. Rachel did not yet know the full scope of what Richard had attempted, but she knew enough to be afraid. The more evidence they collected, the clearer the motive became. Richard had acted quickly because he feared losing control, and he believed my silence would protect him. That afternoon, Rachel sat beside my bed and told me what the attorney said. I listened, still weak, but fully aware that my own father might have tried to erase me for personal gain. Matthew Reynolds contacted Harbor National Bank, and he requested a review of recent activity tied to my name. The bank representative responded cautiously and asked for verification of Rachel Bennett's legal authority. Rachel provided documentation, and Matthew followed with a formal written notice. Within a day, the tone of the conversation changed, and the bank admitted that a new loan inquiry had appeared during the week I was unconscious. The paperwork listed my property as collateral, and it relied on authorization that did not match the proxy on file. Matthew requested the full packet, and he compared the signatures line by line. The bank noted irregularities, and their compliance office placed a temporary freeze on the transaction. Rachel felt a tight pressure in her chest, because the pattern was now unmistakable. Richard Carter had moved quickly, and he had tried to convert my silence into leverage. Matthew advised Rachel to ask the bank one more question, and the answer revealed the motive more clearly. The representative confirmed that the loan was intended to cover a large short-term obligation, and the requested amount was significant. Rachel remembered Patricia Morgan's observation that Richard asked about records and timelines, not about my recovery. The pieces began to fit together, and they formed an image that was hard to accept. Richard was not acting from mercy, he was acting from desperation, and he believed the hospital paperwork would shield him. Matthew explained that banks often accept documents at face value until someone with standing challenges them. He also explained that a forged consent tied to real property could trigger both criminal investigation and civil recovery. Rachel returned to the hospital with copies of the bank correspondence, and she shared them with Patricia in a quiet corner. Patricia documented the new information and added it to the growing file of concerns. That evening, Rachel sat by my bed and spoke slowly, making sure I could follow every word. She told me the bank had frozen the transaction and that an attorney was building a case. I could not speak clearly yet, but my eyes filled with anger and disbelief. Rachel squeezed my hand and promised that Richard would not be allowed to hide behind family ties. Richard Carter returned to the hospital the next day, and he carried the same practiced calm he always used in public. He spoke softly to the front desk staff, and he smiled as if nothing had changed. When he reached my room, he stopped short after seeing Rachel Bennett at my bedside. His eyes moved from her to nurse Patricia Morgan, and then back again, searching for control. Rachel stood and told him that an attorney was now involved, and that questions about paperwork would be directed through legal channels. Richard's smile weakened, and his voice sharpened behind polite words. He insisted that he was my father, and he claimed that outsiders were stirring conflict during a crisis. Patricia watched his posture shift, and she noticed how quickly warmth turned into pressure. Richard asked whether the Do Not Resuscitate order could be reinstated, and he framed the question as compassion. Rachel answered with a steady tone, and she said the order was suspended, and my care plan was active. Richard looked at me, and for a moment his expression tightened in a way that felt unfamiliar and cold. He leaned closer and asked if I could hear him, as if he wanted proof that I was truly returning. I could not speak clearly, but I looked directly at him, and I did not look away. Patricia documented the visit, noting his statements and the exact time, because the pattern mattered now. After a few tense minutes, Richard stepped back and asked to speak privately with Rachel in the hallway. Rachel refused and told him that all discussions would be witnessed. Richard exhaled sharply, and his mask slipped again. He said he had debts. He said he had been under pressure, and he said he only needed time to fix things. Rachel did not comfort him. She asked what he had done in my name. Richard's silence lasted too long, and the answer was written in his face. When he finally left, Patricia locked my chart access tighter, and Rachel sent a summary of the encounter to Matthew Reynolds. Inside my room, the machines kept their steady rhythm, and I understood something painful and clear. My father was not afraid of losing me. He was afraid of being exposed. As my strength returned, my mind began to stitch memories together, piece by piece. I could speak in short phrases now, and each word felt like lifting weight. Rachel Bennett stayed close, and she repeated details until I could follow. Nurse Patricia Morgan checked on me often, and her calm presence helped me focus. One afternoon, Rachel asked if I remembered signing any property documents. I shook my head slowly, and confusion turned into alarm. I told her I had signed nothing, and I had authorized nothing. Rachel handed me the county records copies, and my stomach tightened. The signature looked like a rough imitation, and the dates matched my coma. I whispered that it was forged, and Patricia's expression hardened. Rachel then told me about Harbor National Bank and the frozen transaction. She explained that my home had been used as collateral without my consent. My pulse jumped, and anger flooded through the weakness in my body. I asked why my father would do that, and Rachel hesitated before answering. She said Richard Carter had hinted at debts, and he seemed desperate. Patricia added a quiet detail, and it struck even harder. Richard asked staff about forms and access, far more than my condition. The pattern became undeniable, and my chest felt heavy with betrayal. Matthew Reynolds visited later that day, and he spoke in a calm, measured tone. He explained that forged authorization could be challenged, and the paper trail mattered. He asked me to confirm my intentions clearly, and I told him I wanted full treatment. I also told him I wanted my property protected and my name cleared. Matthew nodded and said their next steps were already moving. He would request additional bank records, and he would alert the proper agencies. Rachel squeezed my hand, and Patricia documented my statements in the chart. In that quiet hospital room, I faced a truth I never expected. My survival was not only medical, it was legal, and it was personal, and I would not let Richard rewrite my life while I fought to wake up. A week later, I was moved out of intensive care and into a rehabilitation unit, where every small movement felt like a hard-earned victory. Nurse Patricia Morgan still checked on me when she could, and her steady presence kept me grounded. Rachel Bennett brought updates from Matthew Reynolds each day, and she kept a notebook filled with dates and details. Matthew had sent formal notices to the county records office and to Harbor National Bank, requesting preservation of all related documents. He also filed a request to halt any further filings tied to my name until the fraud concerns were resolved. The bank confirmed the freeze remained active, and their compliance team opened an internal investigation. Hearing that gave me relief. Yet it also made my stomach turn, because it proved my father had gone further than I imagined. Rachel told me Matthew also requested camera footage from the hospital signing area and a log of every staff member who processed the original order. Patricia documented the timeline again, and she noted that Richard Carter attempted to pressure staff with urgency. The paper trail was becoming a story of intent, not confusion. When Richard appeared at the rehabilitation unit, he tried a different approach. He spoke softly and said the family should stay united, and that outsiders could not be trusted. I listened without interrupting, then asked him a simple question. Why did he sign anything while Rachel held legal authority? His face tightened, and his answers slid into vague talk about love and mercy. Rachel stepped forward and told him that Matthew Reynolds would speak for us now. Richard's composure cracked, and frustration flashed in his eyes before he turned away. After he left, Rachel said something that changed the air in the room. She believed Richard feared exposure more than consequences, and that meant he might escalate. Matthew agreed and advised us to secure my home, change access codes, and notify neighbors to report unusual activity. I stared at the ceiling that night, feeling pain in muscles and pain in memory. Recovery was teaching me how to walk again, but this fight was teaching me something colder. Survival sometimes meant choosing truth over family and refusing to be quiet. When I was finally cleared to go home, relief mixed with dread inside me. Rachel Bennett drove me back carefully, and she watched every mirror on the way. My body was still weak, and each step felt unsteady and slow. Yet my mind was sharp enough to notice every small detail. The moment we reached my street, something felt off and wrong. The front gate was not latched the way I always kept it, and the porch light cover looked slightly crooked. Rachel helped me inside, and the air in my living room felt disturbed. Drawers were not fully closed, and a cabinet door hung open. I moved toward my desk, and my stomach tightened with each step. The folder where I kept my legal papers was missing, and so was the spare key envelope. Rachel searched the kitchen drawer where I stored it, and her face went pale. Someone had been inside while I was gone, and they knew what to look for. Rachel called Matthew Reynolds immediately, and she described what we found. Matthew told her to contact the police and to avoid touching anything else. He also advised us to take photos and to write down every detail. While we waited, I sat on the couch and tried to breathe slowly. I kept thinking about Richard Carter and how quickly he moved in my absence. Nurse Patricia Morgan had warned us that desperation could make people reckless. Now I understood what she meant, and the fear settled deeper. When the officer arrived, Rachel showed the county records copies and explained the forged signature concerns. The officer listened closely and noted the missing papers and keys. He said a report would be filed, and he advised changing locks immediately. Rachel arranged a locksmith that same evening, and she asked a neighbor to watch the house overnight. As darkness fell, I stared at my own front door, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I survived the crash and the coma, but the real threat had followed me here. The next morning, Rachel Bennett returned with fresh copies of my core documents, and she placed them in a locked case. Matthew Reynolds arrived soon after, and he walked through my home with careful attention. He noted the missing folder and the disturbed drawers, then asked the officer for the report number. Matthew explained that the break-in did not look random. It looked targeted and purposeful. Rachel agreed, and she said the missing items were the ones tied to identity and authorization. My hands trembled as I listened, because the invasion felt personal and deliberate. Matthew advised us to place a fraud alert with the credit bureaus and to request a full activity review. He also told us to notify Harbor National Bank again and provide the police report as support. Rachel made the calls in front of me, writing down names and times. By midday, the bank confirmed they would extend the freeze and flag my profile for heightened review. Matthew then contacted the county records office and requested a formal challenge to the filing on my property. He explained that once a dispute is recorded, future transactions face stricter scrutiny. The phone calls continued, and each one tightened the net around the scheme. While Rachel spoke with agencies, I sat quietly and tried to process one simple reality. Richard Carter knew I was coming home, and he acted before I could regain control. That meant he was watching, and he was still willing to cross lines. Nurse Patricia Morgan called to check on me, and she urged us to stay cautious. She reminded Rachel to document every contact and to record every visit attempt. That afternoon, Matthew asked if I wanted to confront Richard directly. I shook my head because I did not want another performance. I wanted evidence, accountability, and protection. Matthew nodded and said that silence can be strategy when the truth is already building. As evening approached, Rachel installed new locks and stronger lighting. I watched her work, grateful and exhausted, and I understood the shift in my life. Recovery was no longer only about healing bones and nerves. It was about reclaiming my name from someone who tried to use it. 2 days after the break-in, Richard Carter appeared at my door, wearing a worried expression that felt rehearsed. Rachel Bennett opened the door first, and she kept her posture calm and firm. Richard said he came to check on me, and he claimed he was frightened by rumors. He said people were misunderstanding his intentions, and he wanted to explain himself. I sat in the living room, still weak, yet steady enough to listen. When Richard stepped inside, his eyes scanned the locks and the new lighting, then returned to my face. He asked how I was feeling, then quickly shifted to paperwork and timing. He asked whether the bank had contacted me and whether the county office had issued notices. Rachel told him that all questions should go through Matthew Reynolds, and that a police report already existed. Richard's jaw tightened, and he tried a softer approach. He said family should handle private matters quietly, and he warned that legal action could damage reputations. The words sounded like concern, yet the pressure behind them was clear. I asked him one direct question. Why did he sign medical orders without Rachel's consent? Richard paused, then spoke about mercy and dignity, as if repeating a script. I told him that I never asked for that, and I never agreed to it. Rachel watched closely, and she wrote down the time of his statements. Richard then claimed he only acted because he feared losing me, and he said he was overwhelmed. Matthew Reynolds arrived soon after, and Richard's posture changed the moment he saw him. Matthew spoke politely, yet his questions were sharp and precise. He asked about the forged signature, the loan attempt, and the missing documents. Richard tried to deny knowledge, but his voice grew uneven as details surfaced. Matthew informed him that the bank freeze remained active, and that county records had been challenged. Richard stood, suddenly impatient, and said he would not be treated like a criminal. Matthew answered calmly that evidence does not care about family titles. Richard left without saying goodbye, and the air in my home felt lighter after the door closed. Rachel looked at me and nodded, because we both understood the visit was not love. It was a test of whether we would back down, and we would not. The next week brought a different kind of pressure, and it came from the places Richard Carter cared about most. Matthew Reynolds explained that financial schemes often collapse faster when social credibility begins to crack. Rachel Bennett understood that too, and she began gathering quiet testimony from people who knew Richard well. She contacted members of Grace Community Church and asked careful questions about recent requests for money. Several people admitted Richard had been asking for urgent help, and he used emotional stories to justify it. One man, said Richard, claimed a family emergency, and another said he hinted at gambling losses. Rachel wrote everything down, and she kept the details organized by date. Matthew advised that statements alone were not enough, and he wanted documentation. Rachel found a church volunteer who managed donation records, and the volunteer confirmed unusual requests for private transfer. Matthew requested written confirmation, and he prepared sworn statements for anyone willing to sign. Meanwhile, Harbor National Bank sent a formal notice that the flagged loan attempt was under review. The compliance office asked for additional information about the forged authorization, and Matthew provided the police report number. He also included the county filing challenge and a summary of Richard's hospital actions. Nurse Patricia Morgan added a statement about the Do Not Resuscitate order timeline, and she noted Richard's repeated focus on paperwork. Each piece was small on its own, yet together they formed a clear pattern of intent. Richard began calling me more often, and his voice sounded strained and restless. He said the church was turning against him, and he blamed Rachel for spreading lies. I did not argue, and I did not comfort him. I told him that the truth was not an attack. It was the consequence of his choices. After that call, Matthew told us to expect escalation. People who fear exposure often take bigger risks, and they do it quickly. Rachel checked the locks again that night, and she set up extra lighting around the house. I sat in silence, feeling grief and clarity at the same time. Richard had built his identity on being respected, and now that respect was slipping. And when a mask starts to fall, the real face underneath becomes impossible to ignore. Within days, Matthew Reynolds received confirmation from the county office, and the disputed filing was officially flagged for review. That single step changed everything, because it created a public record of suspected fraud. Harbor National Bank followed with another notice, and their compliance team requested a formal interview with Rachel Bennett. Rachel met them with Matthew present, and she brought the police report and the hospital timeline. The bank representative asked about the signature differences, and Matthew explained the coma dates in clear order. He also presented Nurse Patricia Morgan's statement showing when Richard Carter pushed the Do Not Resuscitate order. The representative took careful notes and said the bank would cooperate with any investigation. That afternoon, Matthew filed additional documents, seeking to block any new lines against my property. He also requested phone logs and processing records connected to the attempted loan packet. Rachel returned home with a folder of copies, and her face showed both relief and exhaustion. She told me the case was no longer only private, it was moving into official channels. When Richard called that evening, his voice was sharper than before, and he sounded cornered. He accused Rachel of betrayal, and he demanded that I end the legal action. I kept my words slow and steady, because my body still tired quickly. I told him I would not protect lies, and I would not risk my life again. Richard fell silent for a long moment, then said he never meant for things to go this far. I asked why he forged my name, and why he pushed death paperwork so early. He answered with vague phrases about panic and pressure, and then he hung up. Rachel wrote down the call time, and Matthew added it to the record. That night I lay awake, listening to the quiet house around me. I realized the story was no longer about one signature or one loan attempt. It was about control, and what Richard believed he deserved from my silence. And now the silence was gone, replaced by documents, witnesses, and a truth that could not be erased. Grace Community Church held a weekly community meeting, and Richard Carter never missed it. He loved being seen, being praised, being treated like a man of steady faith. Rachel Bennett and Matthew Reynolds attended quietly, choosing seats near the side and keeping their presence calm. I did not go, because my body still needed rest, but I listened later to every detail. The meeting began with routine updates. Then a church elder asked for a moment of serious attention. The elder spoke slowly and reminded everyone that trust is earned and stewardship matters. Then he mentioned concerns raised about private money requests and about documents tied to my name. Richard shifted in his seat, and his smile tightened as people turned to look. Matthew waited, then stood and presented the public county flag notice and the bank freeze confirmation. He did not raise his voice. He simply laid out the timeline, and the facts did the damage. Rachel added a short statement about my coma dates and about the forged signature concerns. The room fell quiet, and the silence carried weight. Richard tried to speak, and he claimed misunderstanding, and he tried to wrap himself in mercy. But questions came fast, and they came from people he once charmed. One member asked why he needed money so urgently. Another asked why he targeted his own daughter's property. Richard's answers became scattered, and his posture grew tense. The elder then asked a final question. Why did he sign a Do Not Resuscitate order so early, while a valid healthcare proxy existed? Richard froze, and his eyes searched for an escape that was not there. When he finally stood to leave, several members stepped back, as if distance could protect them. Rachel left with Matthew, and they documented what happened, because public statements can become evidence. That night, Richard called again, voice trembling with rage and panic. He said the church had humiliated him, and he blamed everyone but himself. I listened, then told him one truth he could not bend. He chose this path, and now the consequences were choosing him. After the church meeting, the situation stopped being rumor and became record. Matthew Reynolds filed a formal complaint with supporting documents, and he requested that investigators review the forged filings. Harbor National Bank provided internal notes and confirmed the loan packet was flagged for irregular authorization. The county office added the dispute to the property record, and future filings were placed under stricter review. Rachel Bennett kept building the timeline, writing dates, names, and exact statements. Nurse Patricia Morgan provided additional documentation, showing when Richard Carter pushed the Do Not Resuscitate order. She noted the urgency, the timing, and his repeated focus on access and paperwork. Within days, an investigator contacted Matthew and asked for a full set of copies. Matthew delivered everything in organized sequence, and he included the police report from the break-in at my home. The investigator asked one question that made my stomach turn. Did Richard have access to any of my identification while I was unconscious? Rachel answered carefully and said my missing folder suggested he did. The investigator then requested that Richard be interviewed and that bank and county staff be contacted for statements. Richard began calling again, voice tense and unpredictable. He said people were twisting his intentions, and he said he was being punished for caring. I kept my breathing steady, and I told him the truth was simple. He signed what he should not sign, and he used my name without consent. Richard asked me to withdraw everything, and he promised he would fix it quietly. I told him I would not trade my safety for his comfort. After that call, Matthew advised us to limit contact and route all communication through legal channels. Rachel installed a security camera system, and she informed neighbors to report any unusual activity. My body continued to heal, yet my mind stayed alert. I had survived being powerless in a hospital bed, and I would not be powerless again. The investigation had begun, and for the first time, Richard could not talk his way out. He had built his plan on my silence, and now that silence had become evidence. Matthew Reynolds warned us that investigators move slowly, but evidence can move fast. Harbor National Bank delivered additional records, and their compliance notes were detailed and precise. The loan packet showed rushed processing and unusual pressure from Richard Carter. The bank also confirmed that my signature did not match past examples. Rachel Bennett added those details to her timeline, and she kept every email and call log. Nurse Patricia Morgan provided one more hospital statement, documenting how Richard demanded updates on forms and access. She noted that his questions rarely centered on my condition or comfort. When the investigator interviewed county staff, they confirmed the filing had been submitted quickly. They also confirmed that the authorization claimed to be mine. The investigator then asked for handwriting samples, and Matthew arranged that without delay. I signed multiple pages in front of a notary, slowly and carefully, while my hand still shook. Those samples became a comparison point, and the difference was clear. Rachel sat beside me afterward, and her face carried both anger and relief. We were no longer guessing. We were proving. Richard began avoiding direct contact, and he sent messages through mutual acquaintances. He claimed he was misunderstood, and he asked for one private meeting. Matthew advised against it, and he said that private conversations invite manipulation. Well, instead he sent a formal notice, instructing Richard to stop contacting me. Grace Community Church leaders also contacted Matthew, and offered written statements about Richard requesting money. Their notes included dates, amounts, and patterns of urgency. Matthew said that patterns supported motive, and it supported intent. One evening, I stood in my kitchen alone, leaning on the counter for balance. I realized my body was healing faster than my trust. Family was supposed to be shelter, yet my father treated my silence like opportunity. Rachel reminded me that survival is not only breath and heartbeat. Survival is also control of your own name, and control of your own choices. As the investigation advanced, I felt something shift inside me. Fear was still present, but it no longer led. Evidence led now, and truth followed close behind. Matthew Reynolds filed a formal request for a protective order, and he supported it with documented evidence. The investigator had already confirmed inconsistencies, and the bank records strengthened the timeline. Harbor National Bank kept the freeze in place, and their compliance team stayed in contact. The county office also maintained the dispute flag, and it blocked further quiet filings. Rachel Bennett felt relief, yet she stayed vigilant, because pressure often triggers reckless moves. Within days, Richard Carter tried to approach through a different door, and he contacted a distant relative to reach me. The message was simple, and it carried guilt and urgency in equal measure. Richard wanted a private meeting, and he promised he would explain everything. I refused, because private talks had always been his favorite weapon. Matthew warned that a meeting could become manipulation or a trap for new paperwork. Rachel wrote down the attempt, and she added it to the ongoing record. Richard then shifted tactics again, and he began telling people I was confused after the coma. He claimed I misunderstood his intentions, and he suggested Rachel was controlling me. Grace Community Church members heard the story, and several contacted Rachel with concern. Rachel responded with facts, and she kept her tone steady and respectful. She told them the bank freeze existed, and the county dispute was public record. She also confirmed that the investigation was active, and the evidence was not rumor. Richard's narrative started to crumble, because it could not survive details. Matthew then issued a formal cease contact notice, directing Richard to communicate only through legal counsel. The notice carried weight, and it created another line in the record. That evening I sat with Rachel in my living room, breathing slowly as pain eased. I told her I still felt grief because I wanted a father, not an opponent. Rachel nodded and reminded me that boundaries are not cruelty, they are protection. The next morning, a deputy delivered paperwork to Richard, and the message was clear. My life was not his to manage, and my silence was not his to use. A few days later, Matthew Reynolds received notice of a scheduled interview, and the investigator wanted my statement on record. Rachel Bennett drove me to the office, and she stayed beside me the entire time. My body still tired easily, yet my mind was clear and steady. The investigator asked simple, direct questions, and I answered each one without hesitation. I explained that I never authorized any property filing, and I never approved any loan using my home. I also confirmed that I never asked for a Do Not Resuscitate order, and I never gave Richard Carter permission to speak for me. Matthew presented the timeline, and he provided handwriting samples and hospital documentation. The investigator listened carefully, and then asked about the missing folder and the break-in. Rachel explained what we found at my house, and she provided the police report number. The investigator nodded and said the pattern suggested intent and planning. Later that afternoon, Richard was interviewed as well, and Matthew received a brief summary through official channels. Richard tried to deny responsibility at first, and he claimed confusion and fear. But the bank records were clear, and the county dispute flag showed the filing dates. When investigators pressed him about the signature mismatch, his story shifted again. He admitted he submitted documents, and he claimed he believed he would fix it before anyone noticed. He said he was under pressure from debt, and he said he thought I would not wake up in time. Hearing that detail felt like cold water because it revealed the truth without decoration. Rachel sat with me afterward, and she kept her voice calm. She said the case was moving toward formal charges, and the evidence was strong. Matthew advised patience, because legal steps must follow procedure. That night, I lay in my own bed, listening to the quiet of a safe home. I felt anger, grief, and a strange kind of relief. The mask was gone now, and the facts were finally louder than excuses. Within a week, the investigator confirmed the case had moved forward, and Matthew Reynolds prepared us for what came next. Harbor National Bank issued a final notice, and they confirmed the loan attempt was formally rejected. The bank also stated they would cooperate with prosecution, and they preserved all internal communications. The county records office maintained the fraud dispute flag, and they scheduled a hearing to unwind the filing. Rachel Bennett kept her notebook open every day, recording each update with steady focus. Grace Community Church leaders contacted Matthew, and they offered additional written statements. They described how Richard Carter requested money with urgency, and how he used faith as cover. When those statements joined the file, the motive became clearer and harder to deny. Richard tried one last push through indirect contact, and he sent a message through a former family friend. He claimed he wanted to apologize, and he asked for a private meeting to explain. I refused again, because privacy had always protected his manipulation. Matthew advised that any apology could be offered in writing, and only through counsel. Rachel supported that boundary, and she reminded me that safety comes before sentiment. A few days later, official paperwork arrived for Richard, and it required his response to the allegations. The details were not dramatic, they were factual and cold. Forged authorization, attempted financial fraud, and improper medical decision-making. When I read the summary, my hands shook with anger and grief. I still could not understand how a father could treat his daughter like collateral. Nurse Patricia Morgan called to check on me, and she told me she was proud of my strength. Her voice carried warmth, yet her words were practical. She said that people who chase control often blame others, and they often escalate through shame. Rachel and I stayed cautious, and we kept the security cameras active. That night, I walked slowly through my living room, testing my balance as my body healed. I realized recovery had given me more than movement. It had given me clarity. I did not owe Richard silence, and I did not owe him forgiveness on demand. I owed myself protection, and the truth was finally doing its work. The county hearing arrived sooner than I expected, and my stomach tightened that morning. Rachel Bennett drove me there, and Matthew Reynolds met us at the entrance. I moved slowly, still rebuilding strength, yet I held my head high. Inside the room, the atmosphere felt quiet and watchful. The clerk reviewed the disputed filing, and the dates matched my coma. Matthew presented the hospital timeline, the bank freeze record, and my notarized samples. He explained that I could not consent while unconscious, and the signature did not match. The county officer listened carefully, then asked Richard Carter to respond. Richard tried to sound calm, yet his hands betrayed him. He claimed confusion, and he claimed he acted out of fear. Matthew countered with a simple question: why were the documents filed so quickly? Richard hesitated, and the pause said more than his words. The officer ruled that the filing would be unwound, and the record would remain flagged. Hearing that felt like air returning to my lungs. It did not erase the betrayal, but it restored control of my home. Outside the building, Richard tried to approach, and a deputy stepped between us. The protective order terms were clear, and he could not cross that line. Richard's face tightened with anger, then softened into a plea. He asked for mercy, and he asked for silence. I told him I would not trade safety for comfort, and I would not carry his shame. Rachel stood beside me, steady as stone, and Matthew reminded Richard to speak only through counsel. Later that day, Grace Community Church leaders called Rachel, and they confirmed Richard was no longer welcome in leadership roles. The loss of status hit him harder than legal consequences, and that truth was painful. That evening I sat at home, exhausted but calm, and I thought about what survival meant now. I had lived through impact, darkness, and helplessness. I would not live through manipulation again, not from anyone, not even family. Boundaries were not revenge. They were the line that kept my life in my hands. In the weeks after the hearing, the case moved from dispute into consequence, and the pace felt relentless. Matthew Reynolds informed us that investigators were finalizing their file, and Harbor National Bank had preserved every internal message. The bank also confirmed that Richard Carter could not reopen the request, and any future attempt would trigger immediate review. Rachel Bennett continued documenting everything, because consistency protects the truth. Grace Community Church leaders released a short statement to members, and it confirmed Richard no longer held any trusted role. People who once praised him began keeping distance, and that isolation was visible. Richard tried to contact me again through a mutual acquaintance, and the attempt was reported immediately. Matthew reminded the court that the protective order existed for a reason, and the violation was added to the record. Richard's pressure tactics stopped working, because each move created new evidence. Nurse Patricia Morgan called to check on my recovery, and she said something I will never forget. She said that survival is not only waking up, it is staying awake to patterns. I kept doing my physical therapy, and I practiced walking longer distances each day. My body still ached, but strength returned with steady patience. Rachel helped me organize my home again, and we replaced every missing paper with certified copies. Matthew filed final paperwork to confirm my property status, and the county office issued documentation restoring clear ownership. When that envelope arrived, I held it like proof of breath. Richard's story had collapsed in courtrooms, in banks, and in his own community. Yet the hardest collapse was inside me, because it was the final loss of the father I thought I had. Rachel sat with me that evening, and we let the silence be quiet instead of dangerous. For the first time in months, my home felt like mine again. The locks were new, the lights were bright, and my name was protected. I did not feel joy, not yet. But I felt something close to peace. And I understood that boundaries were not punishment. They were the structure that allowed my life to continue. The first time I returned to work, it felt like stepping into a different life. My body was stronger now, yet I moved with caution and respect. Nurse Patricia Morgan greeted me with quiet warmth, and she watched my balance like a guardian. Rachel Bennett waited outside in the parking lot because she still refused to leave me alone for long. Matthew Reynolds had warned us that aftermath can be unpredictable, and people who lose control sometimes lash out. Richard Carter had stopped calling directly, but his absence did not feel peaceful. It felt watchful and tense. In the hospital hallway, I heard co-workers whisper about what happened, and I kept my head steady. I did not owe anyone the full story, and I no longer needed approval to exist. Patricia told me the ethics review was closed, and my chart now included clear instructions. My healthcare proxy remained Rachel, and my treatment preferences were documented in full detail. That small administrative clarity felt like armor, because I had learned how fragile paperwork can be. Later that week, Matthew updated us on the investigation, and he said the record was strong and organized. The bank freeze remained in place, and the county filing was officially unwound. Grace Community Church leaders had also submitted statements, confirming the pattern of pressure and requests. Each institution had done its part, and the story no longer belonged to Richard. It belonged to evidence and to the choices I made while awake. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, breathing slowly as pain eased. I thought about the coma and the signatures and the way silence almost became my ending. Then I wrote down one promise to myself, in plain, steady words. I will never leave my life unprotected again. Not by politeness, not by fear, not by family expectations. I will set boundaries early, and I will defend them without apology. I did not choose this fight, but I chose to survive it. Over time, the noise around the case began to fade, and quiet returned in small pieces. Matthew Reynolds told Rachel Bennett that formal outcomes were moving forward, and that the file was now strong enough to stand alone. Harbor National Bank kept the fraud flag active, and they confirmed that no new requests could slip through unnoticed. The county office issued written confirmation again, and my property record was clean and protected. Grace Community Church leaders stopped mentioning Richard Carter in public, and that silence carried its own message. People who once defended him now avoided his name, and they avoided his gaze. Rachel told me he had lost most of his support, and he had become a cautionary story. I felt grief when I heard that because I wanted a different ending. I wanted accountability without heartbreak, yet life rarely offers that kind of balance. Nurse Patricia Morgan reminded me that healing is not only physical, it is also emotional and practical. She encouraged me to keep boundaries firm and to keep my legal protections updated. Rachel and I reviewed my documents again, and we strengthened every weak point. We updated my emergency contacts, and we stored copies in secure places. Matthew also advised a final step, a clear written statement of my wishes, signed and witnessed. I did it without hesitation, because I knew what silence can cost. One evening I sat on my porch watching the streetlights come on. The air felt calm, and for the first time, it felt safe. Rachel sat beside me and we spoke about ordinary things, work schedules, dinners, and plans for the weekend. That normal conversation felt like a victory. I realized that Richard did not steal my future, he only tried. I survived the crash. I survived the coma, and I survived the betrayal. Now I was choosing something stronger than anger. I was choosing clarity. I would not chase revenge, and I would not chase approval. I would protect my life, and I would build it forward, with truth as the foundation. Months passed, and my strength returned in steady, patient layers. I could work full shifts again, and I could drive without shaking. Nurse Patricia Morgan checked on me sometimes, and she smiled with quiet pride. Rachel Bennett remained my closest anchor, and she never treated caution like weakness. Matthew Reynolds called with one final update, and his tone sounded calm and complete. The bank case was closed on their side, and the fraud flag stayed active. The county record remained protected, and the disputed filing was fully removed. Grace Community Church leaders confirmed Richard Carter was no longer welcome in leadership. They also told Matthew they would cooperate if anyone needed testimony later. Hearing that did not feel like victory. It felt like closure. I still carried grief, because betrayal leaves a mark. Yet I also carried clarity, because survival teaches hard lessons. Richard tried to send one last message through another person, and the attempt failed. Rachel documented it, and Matthew reminded everyone about the order. I did not respond, because silence can be a boundary too. One evening I sat at home, and I opened the locked case of documents. My proxy papers were current, my wishes were written plainly, and my property records were clean. I thought about the hospital bed, the machines, and the moment my fingers squeezed Rachel's hand. I thought about how close I came to losing everything, because someone used love as a disguise. Then I wrote a simple note for myself and placed it in the case. Protect your life before you need protection, and never confuse guilt with duty. Family can be complicated, and forgiveness can be slow, but safety must be immediate, and boundaries must be firm. I closed the case, and I looked around my quiet living room. The locks were strong, the lights were bright, and the air felt steady. I was not defined by the crash or the coma or my father's greed. I was defined by what I chose after, and I chose to live awake with my own name in my own hands. Not long after that, Matthew Reynolds told me the case had reached its final phase, and the remaining steps were mostly procedural. The investigator had enough evidence, and the bank records supported every claim. Harbor National Bank kept their file closed, yet flagged for the future. The county office confirmed the property record was secured, and no new filing could proceed quietly. Rachel Bennett listened to each update and wrote it down with care. Nurse Patricia Morgan reminded me that paperwork can protect when people do not. I kept rebuilding my routines, and I kept practicing patience with my body. Some days, I felt strong, and some days pain returned without warning. Still, I was moving forward, and I was moving with purpose. I thought often about Richard Carter, and how easily he tried to rewrite my life. He wanted control, and he wanted a clean exit from his mistakes. He believed family ties would force my silence, and he was wrong. I did not celebrate his downfall, because grief does not feel like triumph. I simply accepted the truth, and the truth brought peace. Rachel asked me once if I wanted to forgive him, and I answered honestly. Forgiveness might come someday, but access would not. A boundary is not hatred, it is protection. Matthew agreed, and he said boundaries also support justice. Patricia said something similar, and her words stayed with me. She said, compassion without limits becomes permission. That night I opened my document case again, and I checked every page. My healthcare proxy was clear, my treatment wishes were clear, and my property records were clear. I placed a new copy in a second secure location, because redundancy is safety. Then I sat in the quiet, and I breathed without fear. I realized the real lesson was not about money, or even betrayal. It was about ownership of my voice, even when others wanted it gone. I survived because people acted with integrity, and because I chose to stay awake. When people ask how I survived, I do not start with the crash. I start with the moment I realized my voice still mattered. I was Emily Carter, and my life was not a bargaining chip. Nurse Patricia Morgan trusted her instincts, and she refused to ignore a wrong feeling. Rachel Bennett showed up with legal authority, and she used it with courage. Matthew Reynolds turned confusion into a clear timeline, and he made facts louder than excuses. Harbor National Bank kept the freeze in place, and their records held steady. Grace Community Church stopped protecting reputation and started protecting truth. The county office flagged the filing, and the paper trail finally caught up. Richard Carter lost the story he tried to control, because evidence does not bend. He tried to hide behind family, and he tried to hide behind faith. But love is not pressure, and faith is not a mask for harm. I learned that boundaries are not punishment. They are protection. I learned that silence can be dangerous when someone profits from it. I also learned that recovery is not only physical strength. Recovery is rebuilding control over your own choices and your own name. Some days, I still feel the weight of betrayal, and it aches like an old injury. Yet I also feel something stronger than anger, and that is clarity. I do not chase revenge, and I do not chase approval. I protect my future with documents, with trusted people, and with firm lines. I keep Rachel as my healthcare proxy, and I keep my wishes written plainly. I keep my home secured, and I keep copies stored safely. Most of all, I keep my life in my own hands. If you hear my story and feel uneasy, trust that feeling. Ask questions, document your wishes, and choose someone worthy of your voice. Because life can change in a single violent moment, and survival can depend on what you decide before the moment arrives.